Alright, this is my NBA playoff bracket prediction. Unlike most people, I actually watch and follow basketball, so I have a good sense and I know what I'm talking about for the most part. And so, without further ado, let's get it started. Lakers versus Portland. We're going off with what just happened following yesterday's game, Portland over Memphis. This actually presents a good challenge for the Lakers. Reason being is that Portland has a great backcourt in C.J. McCollum and, of course, superstar Damian Lillard. And this presents an excellent challenge. Why? Because the Lakers are missing Avery Bradley and Rajon Rondo. And it's weird to see how much that affected them, but it really has. They have nobody to defend a good point guard. Just look at the game against the Lakers versus Toronto when Kyle Lowry just went off. Why? Because they had no one to guard the perimeter. Also, the Lakers are shooting the three very poorly against a team that is all about offense. Another advantage Portland has is its two bigs in Hassan Whiteside and Nurkic. These guys can go toe-to-toe with the Lakers bigs in Anthony Davis, JaVale McGee, and of course Dwight Howard. I still see the Lakers winning this series. It will be a good series, I think, but I feel like Portland used up all of its battery power just trying to make it to the playoffs. If you've been watching their games, if you've been seeing them play, they look drained. They look tired. They've pushed themselves just to get to this point, and now they have to face the Lakers, and I really don't see LeBron James getting ousted in the first round. However, with him no longer being in the East, it's no longer easy being a first 2 or 3 seed. Now it's difficult. Now in the West, you face a much more challenging team right off the bat in the playoffs. With that being said, I think the Lakers still win this series. I'll give them to them in 6 games. I can definitely see Damian Lillard going off for 2 of those games where they just cannot stop him or C.J. McCollum. Anybody just shooting the 3. And the Lakers have a bad night shooting the 3. I think if Portland was to actually win this series, I feel like they would take it in 5 or 6. I don't think it'd go 7. I don't think Portland has the stamina or even mental fortitude to go 7 games right off the rip after just playing another play-in tournament and having to try very hard just to get into the playoffs. So, Lakers get the win, move on to the semifinals, but it took them 6 games. Now let's go over to the East and the Milwaukee Bucks or Orlando. Not much needs to be said here. Milwaukee most likely going to sweep Orlando. They're coming in hobbled. Aaron Gordon's hurt. One of their players who didn't kneel for the national anthem, oddly enough and very ironic, tore his ACL. Jonathan Isaac, I believe. And so for Orlando, they're basically limping into the series. I mean, they really had no challenges, especially not from the Wizards. The Wizards they didn't even show up. So I honestly see Milwaukee just getting a clean sweep of the Orlando Magic. They do not have the offense to go with the Bucks, nor the defense. Milwaukee's just clearly the better team. However, they have seemed vulnerable in the playoffs so far. They have not been really playing as well as many people thought they would. Okay, on to Toronto and Brooklyn. And if you haven't, anyways, this I see as being another sweep. I feel like Toronto is very motivated. They're driven. They're focused. They've looked excellent in these seeding games. Even in the scrimmage games, they looked good. They have the number 1 defense. Brooklyn's coming in here, obviously without KD, without Kyrie, DeAndre Jordan, Tayshaun Prince. The list goes on and on. Their team's mostly made up of G League players with the exception of mainly Karis LeVert and Jared Allen. But they have been very scrappy. Very, very scrappy. Because they have nothing to play for. They have nothing to lose. They're probably one of the only teams in here that literally has nothing to lose. They're in here just to prove themselves, show themselves, and kind of get back at Kyrie's comments that he said earlier in the season when he pointed out the Nets have glaring holes in their roster. And I feel like a lot of these players are trying to tell them, hey, we were a team before you and KD got here, and we're still a good team now, even without you. So I can see them playing very strong, very, very hard. I do think Toronto wins Game 1. I know they've had challenges in Game 1s before, but I feel like they've just gone over that hump. That was the old Toronto team. This one's basically new. I honestly see Kyle Lowry going off in the first game. I really do. And I feel like that'd be very telling for this Toronto team, and if they just sweep the Nets under the rug, it'll show how good they are, how driven they are. So I'll give it to Toronto in 4 games. The Nets, they might be able to squeak one out. I don't think it's Game 1. I can honestly definitely see Karis LeVert just going off, having a hot shooting night, and Toronto, they may be shooting the ball poorly. And Brooklyn may get a game. They may get a game. But with how I think this tournament is, how the whole bubble situation is, how quick the turnaround times are with no travel, if you're one of these contending teams, you want to get out of the first round quick and easy to prepare for the second round. So let's go over here back to the West, and the Clippers versus the Dallas Mavericks. Now, this actually might be not too bad of a series. Kind of like the Lakers-Portland game, I can definitely see Dallas getting a game or 2. They have the offense. They really do. I mean, the Clippers have probably on any given night, if they play up to their best, they probably have the best defense in the league. With then Toronto and then Milwaukee probably running off the second and third. I can definitely see them shutting down Luka for the majority of the game. They really have no one to stop Porzingis, so he should be dominant in this series. I can definitely see them getting a game or 2. Really, really can. The Clippers are just now getting their chemistry back. Obviously, Chicken Wing Lou. They've Montrezl Harrell. The Clippers' biggest concern coming into this bubble is their chemistry problems. They have a lingering problem with chemistry issues. This is something I think Kawhi possibly took for granted, just coming to the Clippers thinking, oh, hey, this team's been together. They obviously pushed the Warriors to 6 games in the first round. They seem like they have good camaraderie, but with how much players they gave away, the players they brought in, with him and Paul George, they really haven't integrated as well as many would think. They haven't had that great of playing time together, and I can definitely see that becoming a problem for them. I really, really can. They haven't had enough time to gel and mesh. And this could give Dallas a game or 2. It really, really could. So, still going with the Clippers. The Clippers are heavy, heavy favorites. I'm not doubting the capabilities in any way. But can Dallas get a game or 2? Yes. Yes, they can. This is the West. Clippers in 6. So now, let's go back over to the East. Philadelphia, Boston. This would have been a great series, even though I should still have the same team winning, regardless of Ben Simmons' injury or not. These teams have a heated rivalry, heated past. Right now, 2 teams pretty talented. However, I think Boston is better. I think Philly's horribly overrated by the media. I really, really do. I feel like Joel Embiid will never live up to what people always keep thinking he will be. And then a lot of media reporters always say, well, Ben Simmons just needs to get that jump shot. Well, they've been saying that now for 3 years. He'll get the jump shot. He'll get the jump shot. He'll get the jump shot. He hasn't gotten the jump shot, people. He hasn't gotten it. So I don't believe he'll be able just to all of a sudden out of nowhere get a jump shot. And now the 76ers have a history of injury-plagued players. I think something is wrong with their system. I don't know who their health and fitness training staff are, but apparently they're not doing a good job because their players are constantly injured. You look at Markelle Fultz, Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, the list goes on. So the process has not worked. And I am really sorry, Philly fans, but this is, I think, the last and final year of Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. I think after this year, it's done. My prediction is Philadelphia, you guys keep Ben Simmons because you can't trust Joel Embiid. You can't. He is immature. I think that's been brought up a lot. He is unreliable. The best ability a player can have is availability, and that's definitely not who Joel Embiid is. Look at the last year's playoff series against Toronto, when he coming in sick, saying he didn't feel well, didn't play some games, and that really hurt them. However, I can definitely see Joel Embiid having one dominant game performance when he just really puts in the work and be who everybody wants him to be. Just get that and have a dominant game, one game performance, maybe even two. But the Boston Celtics are winning this. They are a very complete team. Talent from throughout their whole starting five. Depth's a little bit an issue. They do have Marcus Smart, though. And then coaching, Brad Stevens is a much better coach than Brett Brown. Much better coach. And Brett Brown, I'm sorry, but this is your last year as well. Another first-round exit. The process has not worked. Boston in 5, for sure. Easy, easy, easy. Alright, so now let's go over to Denver versus Utah. Now, word came out earlier today that Mike Conley will be leaving the Utah Jazz. And this already hurts them because they already had an injury to, I think, what was his name? Is it Bogdanovich? Honestly, I didn't see the Jazz doing anything anyways. Rudy Gobert, just, bad juju. Him and Donovan Mitchell have not been getting along. They seem like they are, but honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Donovan Mitchell wants to get out of Utah. I really would not be surprised. Denver's looking up. They've been looking good for these past few years. It's just that they're always in a dominant West. They were with the Warriors, and now there's both LA teams. But they have a good team. Jamal Murray, Jokic, and now their rookie looks very good. Very, very good. They have good talent. They're not getting ousted in the first round by the Jazz. I can see the Jazz taking a game, maybe two. But if I'm being completely honest, it's Denver in 5, which is saying a lot considering the Dallas Mavericks are pushing the Clippers here to 6, and Utah Jazz only get a game on Denver. But that's honestly how I see it going. And then similar circumstances here back in the East. You have Indiana versus Miami. I know there's a lot of drama between T.J. Warren and Jimmy Butler. However, I don't really see that panning out. I feel like the drama is more on Jimmy Butler's side. Their team is a better team. Victor Oladipo has never looked the same ever since tearing his tendon from his quad muscle. I don't think he'll ever be the same player. It's already been over a year, and he's still not the same player. I mean, he could be looking better in another year or two, kind of like how Gordon Hayward was. It took him a while, but I feel like he'll always be He'll always go a little easier, not as hard, because of the fear of tearing his quad muscle again. And then Miami plays very similarly to Toronto. Very hard. Defense, defense, defense. And then they have just a bunch of three-point specialists around them. And, of course, you can't forget Bam Adebayo, an elite player. Very young still, which looks good. To be all honest, sorry, Indiana fans, but with Sabonis out, Victor Oladipo no longer at all-star level. Yes, T.J. Warren was looking good in the seeding games, but a lot of teams weren't really all the way in on those seeding games. So honestly, Miami in 5. And now, probably the most interesting game or first-round series of the whole playoffs this year: Houston versus OKC. Now, pretty sure everybody knows what happened between OKC and Houston. Russ left OKC to go join Harden. So it's pretty funny to see how both former OKC drafted players are now playing against them. Obviously Chris Paul with something to prove, being traded away. All those State Farm commercials saying there's no replacement for the real Chris Paul. It's a little slight jab at the Rockets saying, you can't replace me. You won't do better than me. With Russell Westbrook, and then to find out that Russell Westbrook is going to miss the first few games. Now, that's a code word, few games. If it was only 2, they would have said a couple. They said a few. That could mean 3 games. He's going to miss 3 games of the playoffs. Well, out of those 3 games, I definitely see OKC taking 2 games. Easy. Easy. Taking 2 freaking games. So, with that being said, though, once Russ gets back and Harden has looked fantastic. People keep saying, well, he always gets gassed in the playoffs. Well, he just had a 4.5-month layoff, and if you haven't been seeing him play, he's been playing in almost every single Rockets game throughout the whole game, including the fourth quarter. He does not want to sit. He's been looking good, like the good old James Harden. Obviously, Houston has the capability, unlike most teams in the playoffs, that they can technically beat any team on a given night. If they're shooting lights out from three-point range, Rockets have the best offense in the league then. So, with that being said, I definitely do see OKC taking 2 games with Russell Westbrook being out of those first 3. Could they possibly get a third and push this game to 7? It's anybody's guess. I do have Houston winning regardless. The number of games is up for debate. It could be between 6 or 7. I'm very confident it'll be at minimum of 6. However, I don't know if it'll be pushed to 7. That is a big if. I don't foresee that many 7-game series in this playoffs this year. Which is actually, I'll get into that a little bit later. But so with that being said, though, Rockets versus OKC. 2 games easy for OKC and Chris Paul with Russ being out. Russ comes back. He may be rusty. Houston at 7. It's going to take 7 games to get past OKC. Houston did all that trading. Barely just to squeak by OKC. Alright, so with that being said, now we have the semifinals. Lakers versus Houston. This is the matchup that Houston was basically born and bred and made to play. A big team that's top heavy, low depth, is currently poorly shooting at the 3-point line, and they go all small. And this is where I think Anthony Davis comes in the equation. A lot of people have not been mentioning this. Anthony Davis, as great and amazing player as he is, probably top 5 in this current playoff. I think if Kevin Durant is back, Steph Curry is healthy, he's not a top 5 player. Top 10 for sure. Top 10 for sure. I don't know about top 5. Reason being, Anthony Davis has no playoff experience. The only playoff experience he has was that 1 year with the Pelicans and half a season of Boogie Cousins. He has never had to play as hard as most of these teams here, or as a good majority of players who have playoff experience. And he is their second best player and key to them doing anything in this playoff series. LeBron James, he's been okay so far in the bubble. He's been okay. But I do feel like for him being as great as he is still at his age, it's taking its toll. It really is. He's been having a whole bunch of excuses. If you've been watching any of his press conferences of why the situation is so different for him, how he may not perform, all kinds of what ifs. With that being said, if the Rockets are healthy, Russ is back to playing who they are. Small ball is working. I still do not see them getting past the Lakers, but they definitely push it to 7 games. The Lakers are having a tough time in these playoffs, and that's going to come back to bite them. 6-7, oof, hard. All right, let's go back over to the East now. Milwaukee versus Miami. This is the matchup Miami has been wanting. This is it. They don't have, I don't think, enough of the players. However, I think their overall player count is better than Milwaukee. I think Milwaukee's team this year is not as good as last year's team, which is sad because this is probably Giannis's best chance to win a ring is this year, because next year KD and Kyrie are going to be back in the Nets, and that's a whole nother animal. So this is Giannis's best opportunity to get to the finals, I think. Not even win a ring, just get to the finals. I mean, Raptors no longer have Kawhi. However, I do think Miami is missing that third piece, but I think their overall team is better than Milwaukee. Their three-point shooters are better, I believe. They play just as hard as defense as Milwaukee. They have Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler to create a wall to help stop Giannis Antetokounmpo. I think Bam Adebayo is a very good matchup for Giannis. Definitely minimum of 6 games. However, I still have the Bucks winning in 6. Giannis is on a mission. If the Bucks get ousted by Miami in the semifinals, right? And honestly, I think if Miami were to win this series, they win it in 7. So I'm not counting Miami out entirely. No, they do have a chance to win it, but it would be in 7. But I think Milwaukee wins in 6. And if the Miami Heat were to beat Milwaukee in the semifinals, Giannis is gone. There is no reason for him to stay in Milwaukee. I think he either asks for a trade or next year he just does not sign the Supermax. He leaves. To which team? Well, that's up to debate. All right, so let's stick an East real quick. And in Boston, Toronto. I think this is probably going to be the second best series of the entire playoffs this year. These are two very equal teams. Boston's better offensively. Toronto's better defensively. Their coaches in Brad Stevens and Nick Nurse, both young coaches, both innovative, both geniuses at what they do. So coaching's equal. Siakam and Tatum, even though a lot of people say Tatum is better, I think he has better talent. However, the stats don't say so. They have very similar stats, Siakam and Tatum. So I think they can equal each other out. And then people may bring up the bubble game. The bubble game between Boston and Toronto, where Boston basically blew out Toronto. But that game seemed very odd to me. And I don't know if the Raptors weren't trying at full strength. I mean, it looked like they were doing okay in the first quarter. They were holding Boston to like only 14 points, but their offense just wasn't there. I don't know if Nick Nurse just didn't want to show his hand. Something just seemed off about that game. They OG Anunoby, for you people who don't know, he's basically Toronto's replacement for Kawhi Leonard. He does so he does a very capable job on the defensive end. This was the first game that I saw in the bubble that they didn't have him on the opposing team's best player. OG Anunoby was not guarding Jason Tatum, which seemed very strange to me. They had Kyle Lowry on him, and they had OG on Gordon Hayward, which brings into that discussion. Gordon Hayward will be the X factor for this series. And that sounds like crazy thinking that has Tatum, it has Siakam, Lowry, Kemba, Brown, OG, Serge, Van Fleet, all kinds of players. Reason why I mentioned Gordon Hayward is because he came out earlier before this bubble season even started and said if his birth of his son comes up, similar to what just happened with the Jazz and Mike Conley, he will leave the bubble. And there is no way Boston gets past Toronto without Gordon Hayward, because their starting five is what makes them elite. I honestly see Kemba being neutralized in this series as well. I feel like Kyle Lowry and Van Fleet are actually better than him in the semifinals. In fact, I guarantee Kyle Lowry and Fred Van Fleet will put up better points and have better games than Kemba Walker will. Reasoning? Simple. Same with AD. He has no playoff experience. He played for the Charlotte Hornets. This man has never really been to the playoffs. And if Gordon Hayward leaves as well, I honestly see, kind of like the Golden State-Toronto series. I can see Toronto definitely taking advantage of that and securing the win. I think Toronto wins in 7. An epic series. I think second best series of the entire playoffs. Could go either way. Really a coin flip. I think if Boston wins this series, if they beat Toronto this year, they win it in 6. I think if Boston beats Toronto, they beat them in 6. If Toronto beats Boston, they beat them in 7. Okay, so let's head back to the West. Denver versus the Clippers. As much as I was raving about Denver earlier, and as much as credit I gave to Mavericks and discounting the Clippers' chemistry issues, Denver does not have the firepower the Clippers have. Nor do they play the defense the Clippers have. Denver's been awful defensively. Very poor. People just get any shot that they want on Denver. I was watching the Toronto-Denver game, and Toronto didn't basically play any of its starters, really. And their subs were torching the Denver Nuggets starters, and I was like, whoa, that's crazy. So this one, Clippers in 5. Denver can get a win. But I feel like Denver's biggest advantage was their home court. Out of most teams who actually have home court, Denver actually does have a home court advantage, being at higher altitude and affecting teams like the Clippers who play on the coast. With that being gone, they're still young. Michael Porter, I feel like he'll be an all-star next year, and they'll have their 3 pieces, and they'll make even more noise. But once again, they face the Clippers. Clippers are the favorites. Clippers in 5. And then, now you have the conference finals. LA versus LA, Milwaukee versus Toronto rematch of last year finals. Let's start off with the East, the rematch. This is a huge game for both teams. Massive implications for the future. This is Giannis' best chance. This is his best chance to just reach the finals. Toronto no longer has Kawhi. But what Toronto does have, and I'm bringing up again, this is the X factor in this series, is OG Anunoby. I feel like OG can provide good one-on-one defense against Milwaukee. Toronto has proven they can beat Milwaukee. They have the same group of players, the legit same players who are now just have another year under their belt, a championship ring under their belt, more experience. And they have the same schemes. They have Nick Nurse is a much better coach than Mike Budenholzer. No offense to Mike Budenholzer, even though he was it Rick Carlisle was voted for Coach of the Year by the fellow coaches. I feel like the only reason Nick Nurse wasn't a part of that just was because Nick Nurse, this is his only second year. He was a rookie head coach last year and won the finals. And I feel like a lot of other coaches around the league, they're just a little sensitive to that. They don't want to all of a sudden make a second year coach the esteemed best head coach in the league. So I feel like that was a very petty thing to do by grown-ass men. But they did it. Nick Nurse was the coach of the year because they lost their best player. I mean, think about it. Toronto lost their best player, and they're still second in the East and a contender. Could you say that about the Cavs when they lost LeBron? Could you say about the Heat when they lost LeBron when he went back to the Cavs? Can you say that about when the Cavs lost LeBron again? Were they anywhere near title contention? No, they were not. I mean, even OKC when Durant left. So the fact that Toronto is the second overall seed in the league, they had the second best record because the Lakers lost their last game. So Toronto ended up with the second best record in the league for the second year in a row. That is an extraordinary achievement by Toronto Raptors and Nick Nurse and their coaching staff. Siakam's gonna have a bad game. If they've made it this far, the Raptors, then Siakam had to have been performing. He has to have been performing because he is their only real bucket getter. I feel like, Lowry and Van Fleet will have their nights. Serge Ibaka really needs to show up. OG has to provide that defense. And then if you look across on the aisle on the Bucks are without Malcolm Brogdon from who they had last year. Mirotic is no longer there. George Hill is just another year older. So is Brook Lopez. I don't even think Brook Lopez has looked that good in the bubble so far. Who they got? They got DiVincenzo, and then we're forgetting about the elephant in the room. Oh man, I just forgot his name. The point guard from Milwaukee was named Eric Bledsoe. He has been horrid in the playoffs. This man has no jumper, and he hurts the Bucks greatly. I see Toronto coming out of the East and beating the Bucks. If Boston had made it here, honestly, if Boston had beaten the Raptors in the semifinals to their conference finals, the Bucks make it to the finals. I don't see Boston having the personnel to stop Giannis. They don't match up as well against Milwaukee as they do to Toronto. So I would honestly, the Milwaukee would be rooting for Boston in this series. That way, I think Boston would handle the Boston Celtics, and by handle I mean they'd win in 6 games. This game, however, Toronto in 6. They do the same thing they did last year. Crazy. And with this, Giannis is out. I still think he's out. I think if he doesn't reach the finals this year, I don't see why Giannis would stay. I mean, if you watched the Raptors versus Milwaukee game, you would have seen Giannis sat out along with Lowry, Van Fleet, and Ibaka, I think. And Giannis was just able to watch his team play, and he didn't look very happy because it was basically him off the court with everybody else on the Bucks versus the Raptors without 3 of their top 5 or 6 best players, and Toronto just blew them out. They have a much better team, much better personnel. I could see Giannis joining the Raptors later on in the future because of that. And now coming down to the big mama, the game, the series, everybody's been waiting for, everybody's been talking about, everybody's been hyping up. LA versus LA. This will be the best series in the league, in the playoffs this year, without a shadow of a doubt. These two teams have been hyped, talked about. They've done everything to outpit one another. Each one of them has one of the Morris twins just to outdo the other one. Excuse me. Both of them have tons of ring chasers on their team. Both of them have two superstars, Paul George, Kawhi, AD, LeBron. But the Lakers have had a very tough time. 6 and 7 games. Honestly, I could be overestimating the Mavericks here, giving them 6 wins. Could only be 5. But the Clippers have had a much better time, and I feel like they've built up that camaraderie and the chemistry that is needed for them to be that complete team, and they are the best and most complete team out of any teams this year. The Lakers still don't have anybody to guard anybody on the perimeter. I mean, the Clippers really don't have anybody to guard AD, but I feel like once AD already showed signs of struggle in the Houston series, and I don't see AD actually performing that well in the Clipper series. I feel like his inexperience really comes to fruition. It becomes a glaring issue for the Lakers. The Lakers' older vets, unable to shoot 3 some nights, really hurts them. No, the loss of Avery Bradley just decimates them. Clippers, fully healthy, fully prepared. They have the better coach in Doc Rivers. Clippers win this, and obviously, it takes 7 games. And then you have the Clippers versus Toronto. Crazy how things have turned out. One of the leading contributing factors that I have reason for Toronto coming out of these is because of this whole bubble scenario. Honestly, if the bubble scenario hadn't happened, good chance Toronto doesn't make it, and it's either Boston or Milwaukee. But because of this bubble scenario, the fact that they've been in Florida a lot, it really did gain them an advantage. And then the fact that they already had chemistry from last year's run is crazy. And now their finals MVP, their best player from last year, is now once again facing them in the finals in the version of the Los Angeles Clippers. And this is where the Raptors are just completely outclassed. Had it been the Lakers, had the Lakers come out of the conference finals, I can see Toronto beating the Lakers. I really, really can. They have the personnel, they have the coaching, they have the schemes to technically beat the Lakers, which would be amazing because it would get rid of that whole LeBronto aspect that Toronto's have been having to carry around with them, even though they've beaten LeBron 4 times, the last 4 times they played each other. But the Clippers are a whole different animal, a whole different beast. They match up very well against the Raptors. They just have better players at basically every position, with probably the exception of point guard. And Kawhi knows them. Now, do I think Kawhi has a good series? No. Do I still see him winning Finals MVP? Yes, because that's just how the media works. But I can see Toronto shutting down Kawhi. But that doesn't mean anything. They still have Paul George. They still have Beverly. They still have Harrell. They still have Lou Will. They still have Morris. They have so many players that can just outclass Toronto. And honestly, this would probably be a boring final series because as much as I feel like Toronto has looked great in these bubble series, how hard they play on the defensive end, that's where the talent disparity is something they just cannot overcome. And the Clippers, Kawhi gets his 3rd ring with his 3rd team, and another GOAT debate starts. This is what I would hope for, to have a good series, at least a semi-good series, Clippers in 6. If I'm being brutally honest, and if this is real world, this is how the real world works. It's not fair, it's not kind. Clippers in 5. And that's my final scenario. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you liked it. Sorry about how long it was. I thought I went into at least a good amount of depth about every team, giving possible counter scenarios. And I hope you enjoyed. Please like, thumb, and subscribe. Have a good day.